10 days after the Biden administration slapped a 100% tariff on several categories of Chinese goods. Again, they did this in 2018, 2019, including electronic vehicles. China is hitting back rather predictably, just like they did 6 to 7 years ago. China are threatening to impose their own tariffs on imported vehicles from the US, the EU, going to China, and that is a lot of vehicles, by the way. This is what we've been saying for the last 6 months, probably, when this was news back at the end of last year, and we said, well, you know, Mercedes and the EU and Audi and Volkswagen, they sell a lot of cars in China. They could totally just do the same thing, you know, and that has been done in the past, as I'll get to at the end briefly. So they import a lot of vehicles. They're not just aiming at the US. The European Union is also in their sights, obviously, for obvious reasons. China's Ministry of Commerce is urging Europe not to follow the US's lead, even as we all await the outcome of the EU's Chinese probe that they ran at the end of last year. They haven't really come out and said what they're going to do about it, or if they're going to add a huge tax or anything like that. Quite probably they will. Trade tensions have been heating up between China and the EU and the US, especially over EV imports. This is the big thing, isn't it? 2024, the big thing right now, EVs flooding the world market. And China have the best of them. You know, if I look at one of the metrics from Australia last year, 80% of EVs that landed from into Australia came from China. 80%, 8 out of 10 of them. Amazing. And I can see why they're so much better than most of the competition. That is why. China is basically flooding the world with these new EVs, and the EU and the US are not really keen on people buying Chinese EVs because of the I reckon it's probably to do with the local economies. They will lose too much money from that, in theory. Also, there's a lot of sort of nepotism, isn't there? You know, the local governments in the EU, they rub shoulders with the bosses of Volkswagen, probably, and that sort of thing. In the US, the bosses of, as we saw in 2001, who killed the EV. I think there was a lot of nepotism by the bosses of GM and Ford and the US government, things like that. So the solution, it seems, is to just be lazy and slap taxes on things and thwart the progress of Chinese EVs in the US and in Europe. And I think it's just lazy politics. Politicians have been doing this for decades in the UK, Europe, the US, and they just do the easy thing, don't really strive to build a great place and, you know, society for people in most places. Not everywhere, but a lot of places. That is a common thing. If you're new to the channel, I'm Ben Alexander. Thank you for joining me. I make EV news videos every day. If you enjoy the video, please feel free to comment below. Most people see the comments way before I do. And subscribe. It is free, so that'd be really, really helpful if you could do that to bulk up my numbers on YouTube. Companies like NIO, XPeng, BYD and Zeekr all make really, really nice cars. Have been rolling out multiple battery electric vehicles across the EU. NIO, rather notably, just opened up a really, really large showroom in Amsterdam, where, you know, to be fair, Amsterdam's quite a small place. There's not much space. So to have even a reasonable sized showroom in Amsterdam is kind of like having a massive one in other places. It is a big deal. And that was in the middle of Amsterdam. So what is quite clearly, this is a decisive time for Chinese EV manufacturers trying to sell their products to the rest of the world. The governments aren't taking it. So that was a big move from NIO. That would have cost them a lot of money. So they've been exporting so many EVs to Europe that they've struggled to find enough ships to transport them. And I personally think that this is exactly the sort of thing that encourages manufacturers to manufacture and sell high-end, you know, unattainable type of EVs first, and then you move on to the more expensive, the less expensive ones. It's easier to make the same profit basically with much less resources, such as ships and space, for example. It's a common business trope to sell to wealthier people first. It's easier to make profit with less resources. In late March, China's Minister of Commerce filed an actual official complaint with the World Trade Organization against the US's Inflation Reduction Act, which I did actually a video on a couple of days ago, calling it unfair and urging the US to adhere to the trade rules, emphasizing that there is a huge need for more EVs to combat climate change, which you could argue that's true. I personally don't think you should get a car to be green, any sort of car. It doesn't matter if it's hydrogen, because you're buying a car, you know? So I would say the best thing about an EV is the health benefits. If you just get those cars that are chucking out lots of carbon and gases away from people walking on curbs and riding push bikes, get that away from us, get it away from our lungs, that sort of thing. As the I think it was the Cancer Council in Australia, they noted on last year on their website that I think it was the second most cancer-causing thing in Australia after the sun is diesel particulates, basically. And other data backs this up. If you look in the 2000s in the UK, the amount of people buying diesel cars, I think it tenfolded. I think there was a big push, and diesel was cheaper than petrol because nobody really had a diesel, and then everyone had a diesel. And then basically they realized it was very bad for your health. It's very, very crap. And it's kind of like making everybody a coal miner in their normal, where they live and stuff. You're not breathing in gases and a bit of carbon. You're breathing in tons of carbon and toxic stuff. So it's pretty rough. It's pretty crap to have diesels around you. Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act in 1930. This is a really big thing. So this is a similar situation in the 1930s, whereby it is widely believed to have exacerbated the Great Depression in the US. So this is basically what I think is going on now, really. In 1930, the United States passed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, which imposed really high tariffs on over 20,000, I almost said 200,000, 20,000 imported goods in an effort to protect American businesses and farmers. Several countries retaliated with their own tariffs on American goods. For instance, Canada, the largest trading partner of the US at the time, imposed tariffs on 30% of US imports. Other countries, including the European nations, because I think there's almost 30 countries in Europe. I think it's 27, 28, 29, something like that. They also imposed, a lot of them, retaliated by putting huge tariffs on American stuff too. This led to a significant reduction in international trade, and it is widely believed to have exacerbated the Great Depression. Also, 2018, 2019, the US-China trade war. This was all over the news just a few years ago. 2018, the US imposed tariffs on $250 billion US worth of Chinese goods, citing very unfair trade practices and intellectual property theft. I'm not sure they're referring to the BYD cars, but if you do look at some of the old BYD cars, awesome. I love them. I really do. They make great cars. But if you do look at some of the old cars, it is ropey. It's clearly, they made one which was a Toyota Aygo, which I imagine is still called the Toyota Aygo in America. I don't know. Anyway, they just basically made cars look almost exactly the same as things like Toyotas and, Volkswagens and stuff, and then they just put their own brand on there. Really weird stuff. And I think I've read comments, so a lot of you do know about that sort of thing, obviously. China responded with tariffs on $110 billion worth of US goods, including agricultural products like soybeans, which significantly impacted the American farmers. That was all over the news for about a year. The trade war also led to increased costs for consumers and businesses in both countries and had a ripple effect on the global economy. These things tend to do that, don't they? So it also resulted in a series of negotiations and a partial trade agreement in early 2020, I think it was. Was it 21? 2020, I think it was. And there's also been this sort of thing happen with the EU and Russia in 2014. So basically, I think the only winner in these situations is the political leaders, and that is at best. It is questionable if they're actually winning anything at all. The consumers and the general public are solely footing the bill for this, and we're told it's in our best interest. I don't really agree with that. What do you all think to this? Do you agree? Do you not agree? Let me know in the comments. I'm really curious to know how you all feel about it. And I know that tariffs and taxes and things like that can be quite a controversial thing, especially when talking with an American audience. As my previous videos have taught me, you're not shy to tell me if you disagree. Yeah, thanks for watching.